Hey everyone, welcome back to EverTune'd TV. I'm Matt Blackett, and my guest today is Jon Herington, who many of you know from his great work with Steely Dan, and he's also released solo albums and played with Ricky Lee Jones, Donald Fagen's solo work, Jim Beard, and on a record that is coming out any day now with Madeleine Peyroux. So not to shock anyone who's familiar with this channel, he's also an EverTune user. So Jon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
So you and we've never met, but our paths crossed when I was writing the book, The History of Yamaha Guitars, many years ago now. That's like 20 years ago, I think.
Wow.
And I wasn't totally familiar with your work, but my contact at the custom shop, Ken DePron, said, I really think you should include this guy. He's an amazing musician. And so that's kind of how it all started.
That's cool. I remember Ken. It was he was generous with Yamaha guitars, and I was working for Bette Midler at the time on the road, and
That's right.
I got very
Yeah,
well
I
equipped with
forgot.
Yamaha guitars on that tour. It was fabulous. It really,
Yeah, and that's
he hooked me
interesting.
up.
She's got a great history of great guitarists in her band too, because Buzz Feeden had that gig for many
Oh, I
years.
didn't know that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of tuning and people who
Yes,
are
right.
very particular about tuning.
Yeah, he's
Um,
one. That's for sure.
all right, so let's begin with your Steely Dan work. So many monster players have worked with Fagen and Becker over the years. How did you get the gig?
Well, I had been living in New York since I think it was '84 that I moved there, and this was around 19. Yeah, it was 1999, I believe it was. I think in the fall, maybe October or something like that. I had been working in some Broadway pits. Among them was for a show that was the Broadway version of The Who's Tommy, right? And there was a keyboard player who was a friend of mine who had worked in that pit. I think that's where I met him. His name was Ted Baker, and he and I became fast friends and worked a lot of gigs together besides the Broadway show stuff. But he had been tapped by Steely Dan to record on for all the tracking sessions that were being done for the record Two Against Nature, which was their first studio, album in maybe 18 years or something
That's
like
right.
that, and they worked on that record for about 3 years. I think 1999 was the third year that they'd been working on it, and they had gotten to a point where they decided they wanted some rhythm guitar and they had they wanted somebody different to play it. So they asked Ted if he knew anybody, and Ted had a record of mine. I had made a record in 1992 for a Japanese label. It was sort of a fusion-y sort of record in a way. It was sort of my idea of like what Weather Report music might sound like with a guitar front and center, and
Mhm.
and they had that. He had a copy of that record, so he brought it into the studio, and they put the first track on. I think they made a couple wisecracks about how derivative it was of Weather Report, but nonetheless, I got a phone call from Walter Becker, and he told me he wanted to add some rhythm guitar to a tune. Would I want to come in and do that? And I said, of course. So I went in there and did a session with them. I think we probably spent about 3 hours, and it was just me overdubbing to, an existing track with everything else done. And they basically just kind of maybe do take after take. They didn't have all that many comments. I was impressed that the comments that they did have were like positive ones, like, "Oh, you hear that? Yeah, we like that. Do more like that." And they never had a critical. They never said, "Don't do that." They never did that. It was always a positive response, which was helpful. But I was a little baffled because we went on for hours, and I wasn't really doing anything different. And I guess they were just willing to spend the time and wait to see if any magic happened. I guess no magic happened because they seemed happy enough at the end of the session and sent me home promising to call next week for some more work. And of course, a week went by, no phone call. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, about 5 weeks went by, and I finally got another call from Walter, and he said, "Hey, you remember that track you played on for us?" I said, "Yeah, I remember." And he said, "Well, we're not going to use anything you played." and he paused, but he was yanking my chain, and and he said, well, we want you to come back in. We got a bunch of more tunes we want you to play on. So I think I ended up on four other tunes. The next four that I played on, they kept what I did, and that survived to the record. And somewhere during those sessions, they asked me, if I'd be interested in touring. They were planning a big year in the year 2000 of touring, and I think they had a trip to Japan scheduled, a trip to Europe scheduled. They had a bunch of promotional sort of TV appearances like Letterman and Leno. They were both had shows that were pretty big back then. They had a plan to do a big sort of opening live recording for at Sony. Had a place in the West 50s in New York, and that was going to be 2 nights of a sort of a live concert that they were going to film and record. So it was a huge year, and I was just sort of trying to hang on the first year.
Yeah, that is huge. And so there wasn't an audition per se, and yet
No.
when you
No.
showed up to the studio, it is sort of a de facto audition, right?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, they get to. I think they get the idea whether you can play, and they're
Sure.
discerning guys. They have had great ears and knew what they were looking for. I think for the most part, but they would recognize, good musicianship. Can you play in time? Can you play in tune? They would know that in minutes. So.
Right. No, absolutely. But yours is certainly not the only story that I've heard of them just requesting take after take after take.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
They've had that luxury all their lives, and
that's right.
They never seemed like they were ready to let go of that. So,
Well, it's so cool because then you really kind of got thrown into the deep end of the pool with that because you get to play on several tracks. They're offering you the live gig, then great gigs, all kinds of huge stuff going on within that first year. So that's like a whirlwind. What I checked out a bunch of live stuff, and I really love how you nail the iconic solos, but still put your own twist on them. And I was just listening to the famous Jeff Baxter, "Ricky, Don't Lose That Number" solo.
Oh, right.
And so the recording that I saw you on, the beginning strikes me as pretty much note for note.
Yeah, I usually
And then
start
some of the
start it like
connecting
that.
lines, you do your own thing. The F major 7 line, you actually took up an octave, which sounded super cool. And then the ending was once again kind of note for note.
I tried to quote it, at the end. 'Cause
Yes.
I love that. I mean, that's an interesting thing, and this has been sort of. It's an unusual gig for a guitar player that way, because it's rare that you find a gig where audiences probably know the sound of the guitar solos, as well as they know the lyrics to the songs. They're
Right.
sort of iconic. They're famous. Donald Walter always made great choices of picking guys, but also great choices of which takes to put on the records. So there's many layers of this that kind of create these iconic solos. And for me, actually, the most interesting thing is that though I was really hungry for this the first year, especially I joined, neither one of them ever told me how to approach the gig or what to play. And I would have loved to have to have known, like, well, what would you like me to do? Because I came from a pretty long history of doing session work and working for other people, and not really. I mean, I was doing work of my own, when I was calling the shots, but the bulk of my guitar playing was as a guy for hire, and lots of people are not shy about telling me what they would like to hear, and so I was used to that, but they didn't do that, and that was a fascinating difference to me because most guys are proprietary about their stuff, and they have
Yes.
very very particular ideas about how you ought to play their gig. They just wanted the personalities of the people that they hired to sort of show up in the purest way, I think. And at the end of the day, if they just if they weren't happy with that personality, it was, time for the next guy. And this was a funny thing for me because in the 90s there were 3 iterations of Steely Dan like touring bands, because they did 3 tours, and each one had a different guitar player. So when I got called in 1999 to do the 2000 tour, I figured I'd get 1 year like everybody else had gotten, and then they'd move on to somebody else. So I was just trying to enjoy myself and do it the best I could. I was frustrated that they didn't tell me how they wanted me to play it, but then I figured, well, I've got a couple choices. I can either try to guess what they want, or I can just forget about that and just play it the way I would like to hear it, if I were in the audience, So that was my choice, and it's 25 years later, and we're still going. So I broke the pattern, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's a funny thing with songs that people know, and like if I were listening in the audience, I mean, would I want to hear a guy play Reelin' in the Years and not start the song with, the way the song starts with the quote of that melody? No, you got to play that. It seems to me you got to play that. Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, some other people. I mean, to me, it's a totally legitimate choice to not do that, but it's a real choice, and I don't want to make that choice only because I'm such a fan of the big picture of Steely Dan. I love the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, like, my first responsibility is to that big picture, to sort of, can we make this live thing at least as good as the record? And that's a very tall order. It's not so easy to do.
Yeah, it is.
And I know Donald and Walter never wanted it to feel like a note for note copy of the record, or like a tribute band would be, or that just never fit with their sensibility. They were always fussy about musicianship. They wanted it in time. They wanted it in tune. They wanted beautiful sounds. They wanted a great mix. They want responsible musical playing, but they don't want to just sort of rehash the records, or just try to imitate the records. They want people to be alive and present and responsive and active, like because they're huge jazz fans. They were always huge jazz fans and fans of improvisers. That's why they would do take after take, just hoping that some magic would happen, again. So it's funny because it's a fraught gig that way. Like no other gig that I've ever done requires you to be thinking about that kind of thing. When I play my own music, I know nobody knows the solos on the records. I can play whatever I want. I mean, I'm not locked in. I don't have any sort of standard to uphold. I just do what feels right, But on Steely Dan, it's a different job, because it comes with a lot of history, and I just don't want to ignore that history. I like to embrace it and try to. And I think it's worked, I mean, because I
think so too.
It feels right to me, so it's the best I can do.
You strike a really good balance with it, and I especially like on the Kid Charlemagne solo. That's another iconic solo, and a live recording I heard of that, you managed to absolutely capture the vibe without necessarily playing the licks.
No, there's not much that. I didn't usually, play much of that one verbatim. Once in a while, I actually learned it a couple times and would remind myself of what it was, because I really like it too. And it's such a classic. And once in a while, I would just sort of play the recorded solo just for fun, and actually just to sort of see if any of my bandmates were listening, because I don't know, and I don't know. Nobody ever said anything, so I'm not sure they were listening, or maybe they don't know the records as well as I do. But
well.
It was fun to try that for a while.
You played a 335 on it, which I thought was cool. And then I also noticed that you tapped a couple notes at the end of it, just like Larry Carlton did.
Well, I tried to one up him a little. Like there's that. What does it do? It's at the very end of it. It's he goes. What is it? Let's see. He does something like that. I forget it now. What is it? Let's see. I'm trying to think of the end of it now. Is it? I'm not sure I'll be able to do it without the context of the whole thing.
Okay. No, this isn't a test, so don't worry.
Like yeah. this section here. He does something like that, I think, But
I think he does, yeah.
But what did I do? Let's see. Let's see. But. And then. Yeah, so I tried to do like 3 of them instead of just one of them. And that's I forget it now, but. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And
Not the perfect sound for that, but sorry.
It's an interesting thing, just that one note, because it's, obviously Eddie Van Halen didn't invent two-handed tapping, but it's kind of rare to find it on pre-1978 stuff.
No, it was always a cool thing. It sounds like a yodel in a way.
Yeah, it kind of does. He told
yodel.
the story that he and Dennis Budimir, I believe, were in the studio, and someone had sent in a tape, and they're just going, what's going on here? And so they kind of had to just figure it out on their own.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, those were the days without video instruction.
That's right. Yeah, no YouTube. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit here. That the Madeleine Peyroux has a record that's like just coming out any day now, and that's a record that you are all over. You produced it, co-wrote the tunes, played like a dozen instruments. So what is a typical day like for you when you're covering that many bases?
Well, we don't do that a lot. I mean, that was a sort of a 3-day marathon recording session that we did. Thankfully, it was post-pandemic. The writing happened mostly during the pandemic, during lockdown, but the actual recording happened, thankfully, after that, so we could all get together and record in the same room. But the budget was not great, so we had to do like 18-hour days and 3 of them in a row. It was exhausting. So I'm glad it's not a typical day for me. Those are definitely not typical days anymore, and I wouldn't survive long if I had to do them. But it was a great. It feels great to have that done and to have the record coming out. I think it came out beautifully, and I think it's quite a special record for Madeleine, because it's a more personal record than I think she's ever put out. She's been typically known as a person to cover other people's songs, and she usually picks great tunes by great composers. She had a hit with a Leonard Cohen song. She's done lots of Dylan songs, Tom Waits songs, Randy Newman songs. You can't beat those songwriters. But this is the first record where, she and I, in this case, co-wrote all the tunes. There are 10 tunes on the record, and there are no covers. And so it was a sort of a commitment that the engineer Elliot Shiner sort of kind of insisted on pretty early after he heard a few demos. Maddie had some tunes that she'd done with some other people, and she had a couple that she had done with me. And when we had our first lunch meeting with Elliot, he said, there can't be any covers on this record, and you and John have to write all the tunes. And so we said, what? Because we had only written 3 or something. And that meant like, oh shit, there's a lot of work we got to do here. So we had to get busy. But it was very flattering, of course. And yeah, it wasn't a quick process. We moved a little slowly, but we really had time to sort of really work the tunes in the writing stage, like sending recordings back and forth, editing them, changing little things, and we didn't have to stop until we thought that they were as good as we could make them, and that's a great luxury to have. Sometimes, when people get busy and the world's active like it is again now, it's hard to sort of have that kind of luxury in that kind of time. But because we had it and were able to take it, I think these songs improved. Because I rarely have an initial thought that's complete, and done. It almost always benefits from the editing, and I find the editing is kind of where, I kind of excel. I mean, I'm not like an open faucet, especially with lyrics. I have to wait and be patient for any lyrical ideas that are going to
Sure.
work. But music, I can kind of do more quickly. I'm more facile with that. But even in the case of music, once I have something down, then it's something I can kind of mess with, And I find the messing with it is really where I can, bring it to life. Often,
Yeah.
it's not doesn't come magically sort of done, for me most of the time. So.
Yeah, and that's a really fun part of the process, I find too. The way I describe it is, I never played video games, but just messing with Pro Tools and editing and doing this kind of stuff. That's kind of like my version of a video game, and I really like the process. It's fun.
Yeah, it can be. It can be easy to lose perspective, but the great thing about that time too, and having all that time, is that we could sort of put something away for a couple of weeks and not worry about it. Then come back and say, oh my God, well, this needs this, or this is better than I thought. This is cool the way it is. I like it. We don't need to mess with it anymore. We're done. I mean. You can't always be sure that when you're listening to it every day, you kind of get lost, And so to have that luxury of putting it away, letting some time go by, clearing your head, and then revisiting it can be really great for the whole songwriting process, it seems to me. It helps us, So.
Hmm. Well, let's talk some EverTune stuff. How did you first hear about the EverTune bridge?
I heard about the EverTune bridge, I think, almost immediately after it was invented, because I was paying attention to all sorts of gadgets and new stuff, and I was probably more active and doing more freelance work at the time. Do you remember what date that was? I don't remember when that was, but it was a
2011,
while ago.
I believe.
Oh,
2011,
was it that
2012.
late?
That's when I
thought
first learned about it.
I thought it was earlier than that, but
There were iterations of it that were around and about, and some of them made their way into the New York scene.
yeah,
I think.
I remember I was at Rudy's Music, and they had a guitar there that had the first one I'd ever seen on it, and I don't think they knew how to set it up well, because it seemed odd. Like I liked the idea, but for some reason I think maybe somebody didn't know how to really set it up, and because if it's not tweaked very very well, it can sort of feel funny and like
Yes.
unresponsive, and if you're in zone 2 all the time, like, and you're trying to bend strings, and this guitar's broken, like,
Right.
it's but I was still I remember being fascinated by it and saying, well, that would be great, it's like, and so I always wanted to sort of explore it, and I don't know, just for whatever reason didn't hear about it much until a few years ago. I'm not sure exactly how many, but probably 3 or 4 years, maybe 2019, 2018. I forget when I first decided that I really wanted to look into it. I think maybe I'd seen a video or something, about somebody using it and tracking with it mostly, and just sort of, the aha moment of like, oh, if we even if we're not going to use the track for in the final mix, to put down one guitar with the EverTune, like kind of in zone 2, really tuned, that gave this guy like a pitch reference, so that when he did overdubs, even without EverTune guitars or with vocals, even everything could be sort of, the pitch could be gauged by this, because you could trust it. It was like in tune, like a keyboard would be. If you were careful about setting it up. And so that intrigued me, and I said, well, that would be amazing. Because almost everybody's had the experience. If you do overdubbing, if that first one's not in tune, good luck on your overdubs. And you want to use the first one, but even if you don't want to use it, I mean, it's if you're listening to it, then you're tuning to it. You're tuning to an out of tune guitar. That's not cool. So if you have one that you lay down first that's in tune perfectly, it's a great reference, and then everything else will likely be more in tune because you'll be hearing it. So so that's a great idea in itself. But I was curious to sort of get one under my fingers and mess with it. But of course, because it requires modifying instruments, pretty radically, I didn't want to take a guitar that I knew I enjoyed playing. So that was a dilemma, and I'm sure that's a tough one for many people.
It
But
is.
I looked on the EverTune'd site and realized that they had an SG that was basically a stock American SG. I think that they that they installed a bridge on and would sell that way. So that was this guitar, and this one I had an SG. It was one of my favorite non-EverTune guitars to play, and I use it a lot. And it's got a thing that I love. And I was trying to make this guitar do that. It's not as good a guitar, just in terms of the raw stuff of the guitar. I got lucky with the other one. And this is a different design, and it had, basically I had to go right away. I had to throw in a lot of money because I had to replace the pickups. I didn't like the way they sounded. The electronics I didn't like. So almost everything that was stock on it had to be changed. I even put new frets on it and bigger frets. I don't
Wow.
like. I can't really play. And you'll notice I moved this position. I wanted a master volume, so I took the hole that was closest to my right hand and made that a master volume. This is a dummy, doesn't do anything, and these are tone controls. So I have two tone controls and one master volume, and the pickup selector is here, so I don't accidentally hit it as much, But mostly it's to get that master volume close, because I don't like the unpredictability and the surprises when you have like volumes on Gibsons set differently,
Right.
and you switch pickups and you go, what happened? And I don't do that, that cool effect you can do with the
Oh yeah, the toggle
machine
switch
gun effect.
fading.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I love that, but it's not. I think the master volume just works better for me, so I always install one of those. So it was a lot of work I had to put into the guitar, but it got the EverTune bridge, and once I got used to tweaking it, I was just sort of amazed at what it can do, and it
Yeah,
it
because
takes some
SGs
getting
for,
used to. It's different, but
for all
but
their vibe, they occasionally can exhibit some quirks with tuning.
well,
It's
it
so,
seems like the whole neck is a whammy bar on a regular
yes, it
SG,
kind of does.
this takes all that away. I mean, that's amazing actually, because SGs are, just because of the design, it's so much neck and so little body.
That's right.
It feels like quite flimsy design, and I don't know what Gibson was thinking. Maybe they were just trying to, compete with the Stratocaster or something. I'm not sure, but there's something I even like sometimes about that, just that weird tuning instability on the other one. But that goes away with the EverTune, and so you don't have to think about that. And if you want to avoid that, that's a great way to go.
That's right.
What I've noticed right away, and what I did, that was the first guitar that had an EverTune bridge on it, and I played it a lot, and I was quite impressed. At the time, I was playing some duo gigs with a bass player friend of mine, and all our original music, and I was having trouble because I was trying to play guitar, I was trying to be the MC and talk to the people, I was trying to sing and remember my lyrics, and trying to sound awake and present with banter during the song, between the songs and all that. So I had too many hats to wear, and I'm fussy about tuning. And on the Steely Dan gig, in between tunes, I can just tweak and look at the tuner. I'm not talking to anybody. I don't have to sing. I don't have to remember lyrics. I can just focus on guitar playing. So I got time to do that. I didn't have time to do that, and like the dead air was just so bad. Like I'm sitting
Right.
there like tuning, like a minute between each tune, because I'm fussy. And God forbid if I had to like change the tuning, that would like take even longer, or put a capo on or something. It's like, so this thing was like, it was a godsend that way. Like I just felt like unbelievably liberated when I first started
Yeah.
using it on that gig, because you just can forget all about that. It's
You
unbelievable.
can forget all about it. And,
Yeah.
you mentioned capo. It's very forgiving for capo usage.
No, you
as
just
well.
you don't have to think about it. Just put it on and it's fine.
Hey, seriously, just slap
you
it
never
on.
have
I don't
to-
care if it's crooked.
No, you don't have to pull the strings and make sure there's
That's
not,
right.
not
No,
getting
none of
caught
that.
or anything. No, it's just done. So it's amazing, and I was impressed enough so that I decided like on the Steely Dan gig, I basically play three types of guitar. I play the SG. I play a 336, which is sort of a semi-hollow, and I play a Tele. And I decided that, like, to really explore this, I think I'm going to have three EverTune'd guitars that are all those different styles, and then I can try it and really just play those and see what it feels like on the gig, So, and that was kind of an experiment that I was going to do, and so I found a Tele that was a thin line. It was light, I kind of liked that, and sounded pretty good. It sounds kind of crummy, like acoustically, but you plug in, it's got great pickups, I guess, and they're like, I forget whose pickups they are, maybe DiMarzio's or something, but they sound great when they plug them in. And so I put the EverTune on that, and I put it on this 336. You can sort of see here,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I was able to try using those guitars on the Steely Dan gig to see if it was something I preferred. What I noticed, I did have a lot of fun with the SG. There's I remember Reel in the Years is usually the last tune of the night, and it's got a guitar solo ad nauseum that I have to do at the very end of it, and so it goes on for a while, and I used to I used to just go for it, and sometimes you get into a jam or you like something unintentional happens. What I noticed with the EverTune guitar was that if I ever had like any issues and something was if I got myself into a jam just improvising or something, all you got to do is just play any note that's not bent, and it's perfectly in tune. And
That's right.
So right away you got like, oh yeah, like there's no because what can happen on a regular guitar is, especially if you're bending, the intonation can get funny, and you start
Sure.
sounding like you're really not making it. You're not like centered.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and
this
double
thing
stops way up the neck.
solves the problem. It's just
Mhm.
like just play anything and don't bend it, and like right away it's like recovery.
Yeah. No,
So
I would find
it
that
was
like the
fun.
Chuck Berry kind of double stop way up the neck was like a
Right.
security blanket for me, right? It's just I know this is going to
It's going to
sound
sound
perfect.
in tune.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, it really. I think that was probably the most remarkable thing about just the idea that anywhere on the neck you can play a chord, and
Yeah.
it's just as in tune as in the comfortable positions that you can count
Yeah.
on a
That
regular guitar, but you can't count on them when you get way up. And part of that's technique. You can, I'm sure you can, if your guitar is really set up well, intonated well, and you're very careful with your technique. You can probably do that, but it's so much easier.
it's so much easier. It
You
really
don't.
is.
I mean, I guess you could sort of say it makes you lazy. I mean, maybe it does, but the technology's like that.
Yeah. It's
We used to remember phone numbers. We don't have to anymore. So.
That's right. That's right. I keep thinking that maybe I'll be able to remember passwords the way I used to remember phone numbers. Can't do it.
No, it doesn't happen.
Um, well, we're ever tuning the Steely Dan legacy one guy at a time because there's you,
Oh,
but
really?
then there's also Jay Graydon who played the Peg solo.
Right.
Jay's a big Evertune guy, and he
Oh,
really
really?
likes it for his chord melody stuff.
Well, I was
And
going to say that's what this guitar became my dedicated solo guitar, and I used it exclusively on two of the three solo records that I did during lockdown because instead of doing like 20 takes on a tune, I could do two or three,
yeah,
because the thing, because, especially when you're stretching and reaching for big
it's
chord
the
voices,
stretching and the
everything,
squeezing and all
like,
that, right?
oh, like, and it's just, it's just gets it right so much sooner, like then you can worry about things like, the pacing and the,
That's right.
and the dynamics and just you don't to take tuning out of the picture is unbelievable because I realized I guess only after I got those bridges did I realize how much energy and attention and time like tuning took for me. I mean I kind of feel like I mean, I know string players have to be doing this all the time, like violins and cellos, because there's no frets, and so you got to be listening. I found that that's the same way with a guitar that doesn't have that bridge on it. You have to be listening all the time. And I would
Yep.
do things like press a little harder on one note to get a chord to ring right. I would tune the G string a little bit under because I knew I could press a little harder and get it in tune if it was tuned exactly on the money. Certain chords it would sound sharp, that
That's
note,
right.
that string would sound sharp, so I'd always just get it a little under and then just remember to squeeze a little harder and all that. Well, you can forget about all that with the
Right.
EverTune, which is it's really different. it's a
Yeah.
it's,
Well, and you
it's a whole different
mentioned
thing.
using it as sort of like the foundation for a track in the studio. And I find that as well, even if I overdub with non-Evertune guitars or like play a slide line over it,
Right.
everything is more in tune. My slide playing isn't always that in tune, but it helps me so much to have
Yeah.
that bed that you can rely on. And like you said, almost like playing over a keyboard track or something.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
and so yeah, just a feeling of confidence, knowing that it's going to work. And then
Yeah.
and
The
so my
the
timing might drift a little bit, but my tuning does not.
No,
So
it's fantastic. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's a funny thing because there's a time for that kind of perfect intonation, and then obviously there's time for not that. One of the most charming things about a slide guitar solo is that you're going to hear all the in the cracks stuff,
right,
and that's like a singer. You can't, even
that's right.
singers who are great at being in tune, you kind of you want to hear the little adjustments and the
Mhm.
sort of the nuance, the pitch nuances. That's a beautiful thing. So you don't want to throw that away, which is why I try to get at the very 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 top of zone 2. So when I want to you know scoop or bend, like it's there. But when you really, there are times when you really do. It would really just sound better if it were really in tune, like a keyboard, and the idea that you can do that is pretty fantastic. So,
Well, I caught a Steely Dan gig a few years ago at the Mountain Winery, and just what
oh
a
yeah,
gorgeous place that is to see a show.
it's fun. Yeah,
But that was a very in tune band that night, and so I'm guessing that just tuning and intonation, that's got to be a pretty important component of having a gig like that and keeping a gig like that for as long as you have.
well, Donald is unbelievably fussy about that. He really cares about that. He's always stopping us and asking us to retune and all that, And it's kind of funny. Like when I when I did play the EverTune guitar on the gig, sometimes it was kind of funny. Like I almost had to like pretend I was tuning when we stopped the band. So check the guitars, check the horns, like, and so, and I wasn't going to touch anything because I knew I was already, I mean, it was done. Pretty great not to have to think about it. So
Absolutely. Well, this has been just fascinating discussion. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time. If people want to learn more about what you've got going and what you have coming up, where can they go for that info?
well, if you think in threes, you'll find my website, jonherington.com. It's an easy name to misspell. In fact, the first Steely Dan record, Two Against Nature, misspelled both of my names, I believe. But if you think in threes, JONHERINGTON .com, you'll find me, and we try to keep the touring schedule up to date there, and there's a bunch of other stuff there. Like I sell my records and my books. I've got books of arrangements for solo guitar for sale up there, and the touring happenings are all posted there regularly. So and there's a Facebook page you can find of me too. Just
Okay.
search on my name, spell the name right, and you should find it.
Okay. That sounds great. Well, once again, thank you so much and all the best with everything you've got coming up.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here. Thanks so much.